Hello everyone! In 1995, the year I was born, Pixar made a splash with the release of Toy Story, a computer-generated animation studio. It was revolutionary, and Pixar quickly surpassed Disney to become the #1 animation studio. Personally, I think Pixar has always been somewhat overrated, as the Disney Classics line is much better. However, I also want to say that most Pixar movies are good enough, and there are a few gems among them. Just like the Disney eras, Pixar is sometimes divided into eras. However, these are not nearly as universal as Disney's and are therefore a matter of guesswork. Therefore, I've decided to rank the Pixar eras into 3 categories. The first one is the commercially and critically beloved classic age from 1995 till 2010. The next one is the critically less beloved dark age from 2011 to 2019. And then the third age, the current era, is the commercially less successful new age from 2020 till 2025 going on. It's all fun, of course, so let's begin today with ranking of the classic Pixar age. Most people assume that Pixar's first era was the classic age, the time when Pixar only produced critically acclaimed hits. All of their movies from this period are classics, and I find some of them overrated, but overall I have to admit they have a cultural impact. During this period, Pixar existed more or less as an independent studio, and Disney's influence was limited. This is debatable, as Disney always had a contact with Pixar and was the publisher of their movies. However, they still largely had creative control over their own movies during this period, and they weren't directly owned by Disney until 2006. This era began with Toy Story and lasted about 15 years. Since I'm not covering sequels, as always, Toy Story 2 and 3 are not included in this list. Let's begin. If anyone still dares to claim that Pixar has always made good movies, I'd point to Cars. A ridiculous movie about cars that come to life. To start positive, Lightning McQueen, who starts out as an arrogant race car and later learns that racing is more than winning, and in the final helps the old car finish his race, is very beautiful. The final does have something, and one could argue there's a deeper theme to it. But that's not really so commendable, considering this movie is a long, boring mess. Cars is clearly aiming at young children. The idea of a sleepy town being brought back to life and an old race car named Doc Hudson rediscovering the importance of racing proves that the themes are good. But all in all, skip this. This should have never become a franchise. I'll get straight to the point. I never really liked Toy Story. Not as a child and not now as an adult. I appreciate that this is the first revolutionary computer animated movie of its kind, but I don't think it's good. The animation is seriously dated. It's not so bad with the toys, but the people, and especially Sid's dog, look ugly. I also think that a story about living toys is okay for once, but it didn't need a whole franchise. The many creepy elements also make it not really a suitable movie for children. The chemistry between Buzz and Woody is good. However, it starts with Woody being a real jerk and Buzz being so naive and stupid. That always bothers me a bit, just like Mr. Potato Head with his annoying remarks. Sid, his dog, and the Misfits are just plain creepy. As a child, I was completely shocked by Sid's Misfits because they look more like horror characters than anything else. For those who want to know, I do think the Toy Story sequels 2 and 3 are much better. If there's one Pixar movie that has steadily risen in my esteem, it's WALL-E. I used to find this movie boring, and although the first half builds rather slowly, it's very well made. The whole story of the little robot WALL-E developing feelings for the probe Eve is heartwarming. But it doesn't stop there. The idea of humanity having lived in space for centuries, completely dependent on robots, but now getting the chance to return to Earth is beautifully crafted. This movie is full of food for thought. Even the captain battling the autopilot is captivating, especially with the music of A Space Odyssey. This movie has deep themes of love, but also of what humanity would do if Earth were no longer here. The second half of the movie has much more action and humor, but that's a good thing, because otherwise this movie might have been a bit too unusual for everyone to enjoy. Monsters Inc. is a comedy movie for the whole family. The characters and story aren't as well developed as in some other Pixar movies, but it's not a letdown. Mike and Sully, however, make a good comedic duo. This movie as a whole comes across as mediocre, with Randall as the antagonist being the highlight. The best scenes usually feature Randall using invisibility as an asset, which makes him very intimidating. The scene with all the doors they fly through is also very well done. Henry Waternoose is actually the twist villain, but because we already have Randall, he actually feels good because we really don't expect it, given that we already have a classic villain. Let's just say it's a mediocre story with decent animation, which makes it adequate but not great. This movie is definitely creative. A movie about a rat who learns to cook and controls a human by pulling his hair. While that idea is silly, this movie is very good. Remy is a fun character, a redefined rat who wants to be more than just a waste eater. His brother is funny and his father fulfills the stereotypical worried father without being too over the top. The people are good too. Linguini is perhaps the least as he is very clumsy. While the romance is perhaps a little bit overdone, this movie mainly has good elements. Chef Skinner is a good antagonist, as is the critic. The whole idea of a rat making the best dishes in a Michelin-starred restaurant in Paris, and the humor that comes with it makes this a must-watch. Still, this movie, like so many Pixar movies, doesn't completely touch my soul, and therefore I wouldn't call it perfection. The Incredibles is often considered the best superhero movie of all time in terms of a group coming together. And I can see why. The story revolves around Mr. Incredible, who has a midlife crisis and wants to be a superhero again, despite now having a family. We follow him in his double life, but along the way, his wife Elastigirl discovers this. All the children, Violet, Dash and baby Jack Jack, have their own unique powers. The action scenes are groundbreaking and explosive. The villain syndrome is actually quite strong. He can come across as annoying, but that's precisely his character's strength. This former fanboy of Mr. Incredible has become so depraved that he wants to be the hero himself, but that makes him the villain. His lair is clearly based on Blofeld from James Bond. Frozone himself is very entertaining, though he barely appears in the movie. The Incredibles is a bit too long for its own good, but it's fun for the whole family nonetheless. I often see A Bug's Life listed among the lesser Pixar movies, and I can't quite understand why. A Bug's Life is only the second Pixar movie, which means it is indeed a bit dated in terms of CGI. However, it's still a very relevant and captivating story. A Bug's Life follows the life of an anthill terrorized by grasshoppers who come to steal their food. At one point, Flick, a headstrong ant, goes looking for large insects to save them from this dictatorship. He finds a gang of circus performers, and now they have to pretend to fight the grasshoppers. Flick is a great main character, and so is Princess Atta. The circus performers are all very good characters. Hopper is one of Pixar's most intimidating villains yet. His whole speech about how a single ant rebelling against the regime can spark an entire revolution is a political message that carries the movie. Somehow I always see Nazis in the grasshoppers and Jews in the ants. A thought-provoking picture. Up tells the gripping story of an old man named Carl who loses his wife, but wants to fulfill their lifelong dream, to live on a mountain in Venezuela. He flies there with hundreds of balloons, house and all, taking a Boy Scout with him. Together they see a talking golden retriever and a giant bird. And he discovers that his childhood hero Charles Muntz has actually become a poacher. Where to begin? The story of Carl learning to keep going no matter how difficult life gets and not to be bitter is very gripping. He also learns to trust people. This movie also has great action with the balloon house and Muntz Zeppelin, for example. The logic that retirees like Muntz and Carl can still fight is strange, of course, but it doesn't bother me. And I can only praise a talking dog as adorable as Doug. Finding Nemo is for me the essential Pixar movie. The story follows this little clownfish Nemo who is captured by a dentist from Sydney. His father Marlin journeys through the ocean to find him, encountering all sorts of crazy characters and dangers and obstacles. Finding Nemo doesn't have a central antagonist, but rather various adversaries in the forms of sharks, jellyfish, seagulls and even a deep-sea anglerfish. The story is so gripping because Marlin, an overprotective father, goes to great lengths to protect Nemo after he tragically loses his wife and all the other eggs. That intro, by the way, is on par with Bambi's mother and Simba's father in terms of impact. That barracuda gave me nightmares. He also gradually learns to release Nemo, despite the difficulty. Sydney's setting is creative and all the supporting characters are enjoyable, especially the pelicans, aquarium fish and of course the sea turtles. I could spend hours praising how good this movie is. But for some it will depend on whether they can tolerate Dory. She can be annoying, I understand, but for me she's the icing on the cake. Finding Nemo is without a doubt the best Pixar movie ever made. And it's not even close. I really hope you enjoyed this ranking. I'll see you next time with the Pixar Dark Age. Bye bye.